Have you ever noticed this pattern? She never texts you first, yet she never fully disappears either. She replies when you reach out, she stays present in your life, but she never takes the first step forward. For most men, this creates confusion. It feels frustrating, unsettling, almost like an unsolved puzzle. You start wondering what it means, what you did wrong, or whether you're reading the situation incorrectly. But what if her silence isn't random at all? What if it's not a mixed signal, but a message most men never learn how to interpret? The truth is, when a woman consistently avoids initiating, she's revealing more than her interest level. She's revealing a dynamic, a pattern where effort flows in one direction, where one person carries the emotional weight and the other simply responds when it's convenient. And unless you recognize that dynamic early, you slowly slip into a role you never intended to play. The one who chases, waits, and overextends just to keep a connection alive. Before we go any further, pause for a moment and be honest with yourself. How many times have you minimized your own needs just to maintain contact? How often have you convinced yourself that staying quiet, staying patient, or staying available was better than facing the possibility that she might not be equally invested? This moment is important because this isn't about fixing her behavior. It's about understanding your own. And once you do, everything changes. Before talking about what to do next, there's a deeper question that needs to be faced, not about her actions, but about yours. Because long before a man realizes the dynamic is unhealthy, he usually feels it. He just chooses not to listen. This is where many men quietly lose themselves in connection, not all at once, but gradually. One compromise at a time, one unanswered message justified, one one-sided effort explained away. You tell yourself you're being patient, understanding, mature, but underneath that patience is often something else: the fear of discovering the truth, the fear that if you stop trying, the connection might fade, the fear that if you ask for more, you might lose what little you have, the fear that walking away might confirm what you've been avoiding. So instead of choosing clarity, you choose comfort. You carry the effort. You silence your own needs. And slowly, without noticing, you start orbiting around her availability instead of standing firmly in your own center. This pause matters because nothing changes until you acknowledge where you've been abandoning yourself. When a woman never reaches out first, most men respond in the same predictable way. They try to fill the silence. They assume that if they stay consistent, send another message, or show a little more effort, she'll eventually meet them halfway. It feels logical. It feels patient. But in reality, it quietly destroys the balance of the connection. Every time you respond to her lack of initiative with more effort, you send an unspoken message. Nothing is required from you. No intention, no investment, no risk. Your presence becomes automatic, not meaningful. And once attention becomes automatic, it loses its emotional value. Think about how this pattern forms. You wake up, check your phone, and see nothing from her. A slight tension settles in. To ease it, you send a message. She replies later. Brief, polite, minimal. The next day, the same thing happens. Over time, you've built a routine where she contributes almost nothing, yet still enjoys the reassurance that you'll appear on schedule, not because she demanded it, but because you trained the dynamic. This isn't about blame, it's about awareness. Human psychology is simple in this way. People rarely value what requires no effort to keep. When something is always available, it stops feeling special. When it asks for nothing, it invites nothing in return. By constantly stepping in to cover silence, you make your attention predictable, and predictability kills emotional tension. The shift begins with restraint, not reaction. Don't reach out just to ease discomfort. Don't check in to reassure yourself. Don't fill space that hasn't been earned. Let the silence exist, not as punishment, but as information. Silence only reveals its meaning when you stop trying to fix it. And when you do, you protect the value of your presence instead of giving it away freely. Most men don't lose attraction because they're unkind or insincere. They lose it because the dynamic slowly drifts out of balance. One person begins giving more, trying harder, showing up consistently, while the other contributes just enough to keep things going. And instead of noticing the imbalance, the man convinces himself that more effort will eventually inspire more effort in return. It rarely works that way. Attraction requires reciprocity. Connection needs rhythm. When one person is constantly advancing while the other barely responds, the interaction stops feeling mutual and starts feeling heavy. What the man experiences as dedication, the woman often experiences as pressure. Overgiving doesn't come from confidence, it comes from fear. Fear of losing her, fear of being forgotten, fear that if he stops trying, everything will disappear. That fear subtly changes his energy. His messages become longer, more frequent, more invested than the moment calls for. He begins offering emotional availability that hasn't been earned. And while his intentions may be genuine, the imbalance quietly weakens attraction. Think of connection like a dance. When both people move together, it feels natural. But when one person does all the stepping, all the adjusting, all the leading, it stops being a dance. It becomes someone trying to carry another person across the floor. That's not chemistry. That's emotional labor. Matching her energy isn't about being distant or withholding. It's about staying grounded. If she engages with warmth and intention, meet her there. If she pulls back, allow that space to exist. Don't chase the version of her you hope will show up. Respond to the version that actually does. When you match energy instead of potential, clarity appears. Genuine interest strengthens. Lack of interest reveals itself. And either way, you regain balance, the foundation of both attraction and self-respect. There's a moment almost every man recognizes but rarely talks about. The pause after you send a message, the subtle tension while you wait. Your phone stays close. Your attention drifts. A part of your day quietly revolves around whether or not she responds. And without realizing it, your emotional state starts rising and falling based on her timing. This is where control begins to slip. When your mood improves the moment she replies and sinks when she doesn't, you've handed over more power than you realize. Not power over the relationship, but power over your peace, your confidence, your emotional stability. And the most important part is this: women feel that shift, not consciously, but intuitively. They sense urgency, they sense dependence, they sense when a man's emotional center has moved outside of himself. Attraction weakens when validation replaces self-assurance. The truth most men need to hear is simple. Her response is information, not confirmation of your worth. It reflects her level of engagement, not your value as a man. When you confuse those two, you create anxiety, and anxiety leaks into your tone, your timing, and your presence. Reclaiming emotional control doesn't mean pretending you don't care. It means choosing not to let a notification dictate your inner state. It means redirecting your focus toward your work, your body, your goals, your friendships, the areas of life that ground you. When your life feels full, a delayed reply no longer feels threatening. Ironically, this is when attraction often returns. A man who is emotionally steady, unreactive, and anchored in himself feels different. He moves slower. He communicates with clarity. He doesn't chase reassurance. And because of that, his presence becomes calm instead of needy. Control your emotions, or they will quietly shape how she experiences you. Most men believe they lose a woman by pulling back. In reality, many lose her because they never do. When you're always available, always responsive, always ready to fill space, she never gets the chance to truly feel your presence. And if she can't feel your presence, she can't feel your absence. Without absence, there is no contrast. Without contrast, there is no value. Constant availability may feel generous, but it slowly erodes appreciation. Just like anything experienced too frequently, attention loses its impact when it's endlessly accessible. Not because it isn't valuable, but because it no longer feels intentional. Imagine offering emotional access without pause, messages without space, reassurance without request. You may believe you're building closeness, but what you're actually doing is crowding the connection. There's no room for curiosity, no room for desire, no room for her to step forward on her own. Absence works because it creates clarity. When you stop over-delivering, her true level of interest rises to the surface. If she values you, she'll notice the shift. She'll reach out. She'll engage. She'll move toward the space you've created. But if she doesn't, the silence will grow, not because you caused it, but because you stopped covering it. This isn't manipulation, it's balance. Letting absence do the work isn't about disappearing or playing games. It's about returning to a healthy baseline where your energy is given intentionally, not automatically. You stop being the one who always initiates and become the man who pays attention to effort. Absence doesn't push the right woman away. It reveals her. It shows you whether she's willing to meet you in the middle or whether she was only comfortable when you carried everything alone. One of the most confusing situations for men is when a woman never initiates, yet never fully disappears. She responds just enough to keep the connection alive, but never with the enthusiasm or effort that brings clarity. Because she doesn't vanish, you assume there must be something there, and that assumption keeps you investing long after she has stopped meeting you halfway. This is where many men get stuck. As long as you continue carrying the momentum, you'll never know her real level of interest. She doesn't need to show it. You've made the connection easy to maintain, effortless for her, costly for you. And in that space, hope replaces honesty. Testing her interest doesn't mean confrontation, ultimatums, or emotional pressure. It means creating a moment where her actions have to speak. You step back slightly. You stop being the first to reach out. You stop following up when she goes quiet, not out of frustration, but out of clarity. Then you observe. Does she notice the shift? Does she move toward you? Does she initiate contact or make an effort to reconnect? Or does the silence settle comfortably, as if nothing of value is missing? Here's the truth most men avoid. If a connection fades the moment you stop carrying it, it was never mutual. And that realization isn't a loss, it's freedom. You're not being rejected, you're being informed. Her behavior will answer the question you've been avoiding without a single difficult conversation. Let her effort reveal her interest. Words can reassure, actions expose reality. There comes a point where the issue is no longer her silence or inconsistency. The real issue becomes the standard you've accepted. When you continue investing in someone who offers little in return, it's rarely because of love. More often, it's driven by fear. Fear of being alone, fear of starting over, fear that this might be the best you can do. Those fears quietly convince men to accept minimal effort and call it a connection. You begin making excuses on her behalf. You tell yourself she needs time, she's not good at expressing herself, or she's just busy. But in protecting your hope, you slowly sacrifice your self-respect. A man without standards doesn't become more understanding. He becomes invisible to his own needs. Raising your standards isn't about becoming demanding or cold. It's about becoming honest. Honest about what you're receiving. Honest about how the dynamic makes you feel. Honest about whether the connection only survives because you keep giving it life. When you tolerate neglect, you train yourself to believe that inconsistency is normal. Over time, your world shrinks to fit someone else's indifference. And the longer you stay, the harder it becomes to remember that mutual effort should feel natural, not negotiated. Standards are not rules you impose on others. They're boundaries you set for yourself. They determine who gets access to your time, energy, and emotional availability. When you raise them, the wrong connections fall away, not because you pushed them out, but because they could never meet you there.